second.
Time's up.
Give me 2 more seconds. Time's up.
Was it true crime presentation?
And a little bit, yeah. There's definitely murderers involved in tonight's thing. So
Is there a title? Oh, the poisoners.
the poisoners.
Is one of the poisoners H.H. Holmes?
No.
Is it? No. Okay.
Although he may be, he's just not one of the ones in the presentation tonight.
Okay, we're gonna continue now.
All right, so tonight's the poisoners, the deadly elements. These are mostly the non-radioactive ones. We'll have a whole other class on radioactive minerals and why they're toxic. So we're going to be, what's going on? There we go. So we're mostly dealing with these ones along here, and then a couple over there. So. All right, toxic elements. Most elements are toxic if ingested in significant quantities. Elements, even common elements like aluminum, copper, boron, barium, cobalt, iron, lithium, magnesium, vanadium, and zinc can be toxic if you ingest too much of them. Do any of those sound familiar? Mm-hmm. Like all the ones you take in your vitamins every morning? Mm-hmm. Yep. So yeah, don't take too many vitamins. And then most of the ones we'll talk about tonight are non-radioactive. So the first one we're going to discuss is beryllium. How many were here last month? Yeah, so we talked about beryllium last month a little bit, and we had the Tiffany stone, which is a beryllium mineral. Okay, this one's not that toxic. It's not toxic at all. I'll pass that one around. This is actually bertrandite crystals surrounded with fluorite staining in there. So those are kind of cool. The other beryllium minerals include emerald. Massive emerald has actually been mined and crushed up for the beryllium
Will
content.
you hold those up to the camera before you pass them around?
Yes, I will. There's an emerald.
For the home video.
Okay. That's a nice big faceted emerald from Brazil or Colombia. Aquamarine is another one. So the blue aquamarine's a beryllium mineral. I tried to find different ones from last month so they would be a little more interesting.
What's it sitting on, Rick?
It's sitting on feldspar and tourmaline, black tourmaline. And this one I'm not going to pass around. I'm just going to show. This is a red beryl from here in Utah. This has got the white twin. It's very, very rare. So, but that's a red emerald from here in Utah.
It's a what?
A red emerald, a red beryl from Utah. All right, and this vial has got refined beryllium in it. This is also from here in Utah. This is toxic enough that even handling it can poison you, so I keep it in a sealed glass tube, which incidentally last month broke and I had to put it in a new glass tube. So.
You lived to tell us about it.
I live to tell about it. So now beryllium is interesting. It has a well, here's where it forms within the cores of stars, and as it's depleted, it turns into heavier elements. So it works its way down and becomes a heavier and heavier and heavier element.
What was this green one?
An emerald.
So it's poisonous?
Only if you refine the beryllium out of it.
Oh,
It's a beryllium oxide, and so that keeps the oxide, keeps it.
okay. So a lady who's wearing it is
It's not going to, even if she swallowed it, even if she ground it up and swallowed it, it wouldn't poison her.
Okay.
So. Beryllium constitutes about 0.0004% of the Earth's mass in the crust. The world's annual production of beryllium is about 220 tons. That's about all that's extracted annually, and 160 of those tons come from here in Utah. So, beryllium is found in over 100 different minerals. Most of them are very uncommon and very rare. Enrico Fermi, one of the great chemists in history, discovered beryllium and noted, I guess it was just common for chemists to just taste everything when they were discovering new stuff. And so he tasted it and noticed that it had a very sweet taste, similar to sugar, and shortly died afterwards.
Oh, boy.
I just passed around some of these there. So beryllium is transparent to X-rays and gamma rays, so it's used a lot in the front of those kinds of machines in the medical field. You can take a piece of beryllium and heat it with a torch until it's absolutely cherry red. So in that glass tube, you can heat that till it's just absolutely glowing cherry red. And by the time you turn off the torch, you can pick it up because it will not absorb heat. It is very negatively thermodynamic. That makes it very useful in airline brakes when they have all that friction. So airline brakes are one of the places that a lot of that beryllium goes to. It also goes into alloying, making an alloy with copper to make hammers and tools. There's wrenches as well that are made with the beryllium and copper alloy because they're non-sparking. So if you're working in an environment that, like an oil and gas field, you have to have non-sparking tools. That's where they mostly get used for. I've been trying to acquire a set of beryllium wrenches, but they're stupid expensive.
So the airport landing strips are contaminated with
Absolutely.
beryllium dust.
Yes, they are. Yep. All right, it's also very corrosion resistant, which makes it also good for tools. All right, chlorine and bromine. There we go. Bromine was used in World War I by the Germans. They started putting it in artillery shells and shooting it out to try and bomb mostly the French and then the English. But because it was a liquid and it sloshed around in the artillery round, it made them very inaccurate. They also, the first attack they did using it, they did it on a windy day and it all blew back towards them. So it had no effect. The French didn't even know that they had been attacked. They weren't really. And so they quickly removed from bromine to chlorine, which was a gas. It was easier to deploy and it was very, very effective against soldiers. It just absolutely scorched the lungs and killed many of the people that died from chlorine poisoning in the bombs. It was because of the it would scorch the lungs and then they would get pneumonia and then there was no hope.
So that's why in swimming pools they have to be careful with the right mixtures.
Right, you can't over-chlorinate it, yes. And then because they're using chlorine tablets, they put them down in there, they dissolve, and it's the chlorine gas that goes through there and kills all the bacteria and everything. So, which is why bleach and chlorine tablets work so well. We use bleach at home. If you ever open up a bottle and you're standing over it, you just get that whiff of the chlorine gas in your lungs, you instantly know that that's not fun. All right, so chlorine minerals, chlorine and bromine minerals, by far the chlorine we get the most of is just from the ocean water, is where we get most of that from, the salt. And halite is the most common of the chlorine minerals, so I'm going to pass that one around. This is basically just salt out of the Great Salt Lake. It's just growing on a rock. We went out there one day and found it. And so that's where they get a lot of it from, that in the ocean. So, sodalite is another sodium mineral, sodium mineral. So bromargyrite is right here. I'm going to pass this around in the box. It's not toxic to touch. It's just very, very fragile. So this one is like a big sponge, and every time somebody touches it, little pieces fall off. So I'm just going to pass it around like that. You look down there. This is bromium chlorargyrite, which is bromium and silver and iodide.
But in sodalite, if you just have a rock, it's not going to hurt you?
No.
Oh, okay.
Not in the least. Okay. All right, here's one of the nastier of the nasties, cadmium. In the 18th century Japan, miners were digging for precious metals such as gold, lead, and silver, and copper in the Kamioka mines in Japan. It took over 100 years for people to realize that the mine also contained cadmium. They had no use for cadmium, so when they boiled it off in the acid, they just dumped it in the streams, they dumped it on the ground in their defense, they didn't know how dangerous it was. So it just got dumped and nobody cared. In 1912, I believe it was, there was the itea disease. Anybody know what that means? It means ouch, ouch disease. Cadmium replaces the calcium in your bones, and it makes it very, very, very brittle. And so the problem they would have is that, and it's very painful to have that replaced, and then your bones are very brittle. In fact, they're so brittle that when doctors would go and take the pulse, it would crack the bones, just trying to take a pulse. And so it killed many, many people. It's because it would soak into the rice fields, and the rice acted like a sponge and just soaked it right up, and it went right into the grains. So that was very, very toxic. And it wasn't until the 1930s and 40s that it had spread all over Japan, and then a doctor, Noboru Hagino, he put it together that it was coming from the rice. And so I don't know what they did to fix the problem. I mean, they still have rice, but they had to get rid of that, and the mining company obviously denied all responsibility for it. Oh, it's not our fault, we didn't do anything. But the courts awarded them a 2.3 billion yen per year restitution to the victims. I think they're still paying it. It's a huge amount of money, but there you have it. This is actually the mine, the Kamiyoko mine, still active today. But they don't dump the cadmium on the ground. Cadmium is way too valuable nowadays. So we use cadmium, has nuclear applications. It goes down between the nuclear rods, so it can control the amount of reaction. So it eliminates it. It's also used in nickel cadmium batteries. And if you have a Halliburton briefcase, those metal briefcases, the James Bond briefcases, those are coated, anodized with cadmium. And so, but it's anodized, they're not toxic, unless you scrape the cadmium off and snort it. So, it's also used in paints. Cadmium paints are your real vivid, strong yellows. I think I might even have a picture. This is Niedermeyerite. It's a beautiful mineral, but that field of view across there is probably 2 millimeters, so they're small. So, greenockite is this. It's the orange on here. You would think greenockite would be green, but it's not. It's named after a guy that's name was Greenock. So I'll pass that. It's the orange on there, and this is refined cadmium. This is one you don't touch. So. It's sometimes found in tetrahedrite and tenantite, which are copper minerals, copper sulfides, copper silver sulfides, and it's sometimes found in that, but usually it comes out and turns into the greenockite on the surface. So you'll find these metallic crystals with the greenockite on top of them. All right, arsenic. Everybody knows about arsenic, right? This is the king of poisons. It's nearly tasteless, odorless, and it's a middleweight. So it has been used in royalty to kill royalty off so that the next person could move up for centuries. And was first used about 3000 BC. It was mined and added to copper to make an alloy of bronze. The problem with it is that it was too toxic to use for anything, and even the alloying process killed many of the workers. So they abandoned it when they discovered tin and started using it for that. First recorded poisoning, intentional poisoning, was 55 AD when the Roman Emperor Nero poisoned his stepbrother Britannicus. Oh, that was interesting. Arsenic poisoning is a global health issue affecting millions of people worldwide, even today, because it winds up in the environment and it's easily absorbed into food.
Is that the one that makes you foam in your mouth if you take it?
I don't know.
Or is
I've never
that-
seen anybody that actually had it.
There was an NGO that drilled wells in India to provide water for different villages, but nobody tested it. It was full of arsenic,
Oh,
and so it was poisoning the people.
I believe it. In fact, that's one of the things that they said is that a lot of well water has arsenic in it naturally. Out in Pine Canyon, they have a problem with well water that has high arsenic levels in it in some places. Most of the wells out there now that have had that arsenic problem have been capped. So I actually think they dumped cement down them. So.
Down by St. George?
No, in Pine Canyon, out in Tooele.
Oh, Pine Canyon, okay, in Twilla.
In the 1800s, ads like this ran saying that you could buy these little wafers of arsenic and use them as makeup, and it would make your face this nice bleachy white, which apparently a lot of women really liked back then. And it would, because it was killing your blood vessels, it would also make your cheeks nice and rosy, which I guess was also wonderful. Let's see, it's rubbing arsenic on your face would transform you into a lovely creature and an object of worship. That was in a different ad. I couldn't get that one to show up on here.
I like the warranted perfectly harmless.
Yeah, perfectly harmless. Yes. Yes. Toxic, but perfectly harmless. So this ad is from 1896. I can't even imagine today. So when I was going to school at Butte, we had this story that went around there, and I've tried to find documentation of it. I think that the mining companies have taken great lengths to make sure this never made the news. But they would have a lot of arsenic, and it was refined arsenic because they were removing it from the copper ore, and they would take it and put it in these rail cars, bigger than these, I mean like full-size rail cars, coming out of the plant, and they had one in these rails that, if you've ever been to Butte, the mines are literally downtown, and the rail that all the mines used run through the town. And they had one of these rail cars, these big ones, tip over full of arsenic powder. Nobody realized how toxic it was. I don't even think they realized that it was arsenic powder at first. The fire department came down and hosed off the street so people could keep going, and all that ran into a neighborhood, into the family that lived closest to it. Most of it went in their garden. Not realizing that it was arsenic or that it was toxic, the next year they grow their vegetable gardens, and the tomatoes killed all 4 people in the family, killed all of them because of the arsenic levels. And then a lot of the people in that neighborhood got sick, and so the mine company had to come in, tear down the houses, dig right through everything. They took out like the top 5 feet of dirt, hauled it all off, and then rebuilt everything. So, but I can't find evidence of that in literature. So.
Well, if you drive through Butte, it looks like a toxic city.
Right?
It really does.
I love Butte. I lived there for a year and a half and loved every minute of it. But yeah, it does look like a toxic city. So arsenic is used in wood preservation. It's often alloyed with lead for car batteries. It's used in pesticides still, and it's used as pigment. So.
Do you know about Paris green? It's the paint that they used in old Victorian mansions, that really lovely green. You'd see, yeah,
Does that come from arsenic?
It's arsenic paint. That's why a lot of old Victorian homes have high arsenic levels.
That's awesome. Oh yeah, green is one of the colors. It's used for yellow, orange, red, and green.
Also called Vienna green, has different names, but yeah, it was coated on everything.
Yeah.
Beautiful green color.
That's like the yellow from uranium, yellow cake. They used it as a paint pigment in Moab and painted all the houses bright yellow. So it's still used in some pharmaceuticals, and it's used in some pharmaceuticals, especially for the treatment of syphilis.
Yeah, because it kills you.
It kills a lot of things. It's put in glass to prevent bubbles from forming in glass, so to keep the glass very pure. So, but we're talking parts per million, maybe even parts per billion. It's also used in semiconductors. So, I passed around the little box that has the bright yellow and bright red in there. Those are realgar and orpiment. Realgar is the red, orpiment's the yellow. Eventually, all realgar will oxidize and become orpiment, will become the yellow. So. Now, we always hear about how toxic realgar and orpiment is, and I always love seeing this on Facebook, how toxic they are. And when I was going to school up at the School of Mines in Butte, I went to my professor, my chemistry professor, and I said, I keep hearing how toxic this is, but it's a sulfide. Our bodies don't absorb sulfides. He's like, no, you'd have to eat pounds of this. I said, let's figure out exactly how much has to be consumed in order to be toxic. So we did the calculations, and you know, we did a lot of research. It took us about a year. You would have to grind up that yellow box of stuff and snort about 3 pounds at once to get enough arsenic from that to make you sick. Now, eating it, it's just going to go right through because it's a sulfide. It doesn't break down in your system. It's no worries at all. But 3 pounds of arsenic dust in your lungs, I think you're going to get sick long before you get 3 pounds of realgar and orpiment in your lungs. So don't worry about that. Now there are some beautiful arsenic minerals, the realgar and orpiment. You know, these are some nice realgar crystals. I have seen realgar crystals over an inch. In fact, there's one almost an inch in that cabinet. I didn't bring it out because it's really fragile. Adamite is another one. We see these beautiful adamite specimens that come from Mexico. I'm just going to kind of show that one around. So I didn't bring the fluorescent light in, but this is like bright neon greenish yellow. So. I didn't realize there's so many people behind me. Hi, everybody.
Hi, we're here to support.
Well, thank you. Now this is one I will pass around. This is another arsenic mineral. This is calcite. It's I think it's a silicate. So, but it's the arsenic that's causing it to be green. Often confused with malachite, but it's not. It's not toxic to handle. It's not toxic to hold or breathe or anything. A lot of the mine trips we go to, Gold Hill and the Centennial, have lots of this stuff laying around. And this is another one I'm not going to pass around. These are hubnerite crystals that are growing up, and they have little balls of native arsenic, pure arsenic, just growing right on the surface. This one's from Peru. So, yeah, they're kind of small. And these will all be up here if you guys can come see them afterwards as well. Oh, to the camera, thank you. I keep forgetting that. Dang it.
The balls and the crystals are the same mineral.
No, the crystals standing up are hubnerite and the balls are arsenic, native arsenic.
Oh, wow.
I have a bigger chunk of just native arsenic, but I couldn't find it. Let's see. Okay. All right. There are about 1,230 arsenic minerals. Most of them are very obscure. You won't see most of them. All right, next one, thallium. This is the poisoner's poison, or the inheritance poison, because it's been used many times to kill off mom and dad so you get their inheritance. Or grandma and grandpa. It is usually considered the worst of all the poisons in the periodic table that are not radioactive. You have thallium, beryllium, lead, and polonium, and by far thallium is the worst. In the 1960s, a British man named Graham Frederick Young deliberately poisoned his family members with thallium, arsenic, and antimony, which he sprinkled in their tea. He was playing with them to see how toxic it was and how much it would take to kill them. He was placed in a mental institution, and after getting out, he poisoned a series of his bosses, deliberately giving them small doses in order to prolong their suffering. So, kind of a sick guy. Anybody recognize him? Fidel, yes, Fidel Castro. The CIA once considered humiliating Fidel Castro by putting thallium powder in his socks, because one of the side effects of thallium poisoning is your hair falls out. They wanted to get rid of his beard to humiliate him. It was never actually executed, but apparently this is like a well-known public document. So, you still get thallium poisoning from smoking cigarettes. Tobacco is one of the plants that just absorbs it like crazy. The levels of thallium in smokers with clinical signs of depression, sleep disorders, and memory loss and sweating were higher than those of people that smoked it without the thallium in their contamination. In 2021, a random sample of beef from Utah, from a Utah slaughterhouse, was collected as the USDA often does, and it tested well above the legal limits, or not the legal limits, but the safe limits of thallium in beef. It was tested at several labs because nobody could believe that we had beef that had thallium in it. They were never ever able to trace back where that thallium came from, but they had to get rid of a whole bunch of cows. So, that was just in 2021.
They could never trace where it came
No,
from?
no, it had to be in something they ate, but no, they couldn't figure out where it came from. Today we get thallium exposure from coal mining and burning, coal mining and the burning of coal. It's in the ash and in the vapor, and so it's very evident in the Great Salt Lake when they do core samples out in the lake into the mud. They can see right where we started burning coal in the valley, and you can see exactly where the thallium and mercury spike in that. So. It's also used in making electronics, glass manufacturing, and optical production. Okay, so some of the thallium minerals, like the parapierotite, the second one down, I have that. They're microscopic, and I didn't want to set up a microscope for this. So Hutchinsonite is probably the most common thallium mineral, and it is one of the more toxic ones. I'm going to pass it around. It's this box here. It is the black underneath the orange. The orange is orpiment, which is an arsenic mineral, and the thallium is the black underneath there.
Don't lick it.
Don't lick it.
Rock counters are famous for licking rock.
Yes, yes. Not all of them survive it.
Not all survive.
So this is the lorandite, and this is a crystal from here in Utah. You can see the red there. That is, I guess in nature, red means go away. I don't know. But that's a lorandite crystal from here in Utah. It is the best lorandite crystal in the world. I paid a fortune for this thing because it was from Utah. But
Do you want to show it to the camera?
oh, the camera. I forget about the camera every time. So I'm not going to pass it around. This one's like really, really valuable.
Can you still find those then?
No, these actually were found in one boulder a little bit bigger than this table. And they were found by accident, and a geologist named Jim Wilson worked for Weber State. He took them, and he's like, that doesn't look like Realgard. Let me take it and analyze it. And so he had about 30 samples, 30 crystals. This was the best one.
What mine was it from?
Mercury.
Oh, wow.
I've had many mineral dealers offer to buy this from me. Several of them threatened to steal it.
So it's crystal in the middle?
It's the big red crystal, yeah.
Oh, it's the whole,
The whole
piece
red
of
crystal,
red.
yeah. Mhm.
okay.
The Ophir Mercury area sure had a lot of minerals, doesn't it?
Yes, it did.
Thallium poisoning's a weird one. It's one of the ones that starts from your legs and works its way up. It causes peripheral nerve damage. That's like its calling card
For the thallium?
for thallium, yeah.
Kevin's a chemist, so
Yeah, your hands and feet.
he's here to make sure I get this all right.
And well, in cases where they've actually prosecuted like thallium poisoners, like it's like your hands and feet are on fire
Yeah.
while you're dying.
Yep. There was a case where a guy from Mensa that belonged to Mensa got in a really bad pissing match with his neighbor and hated the woman. So he went into her house when she wasn't home and opened her Coke and put a bunch of thallium in it and then closed it back up because you can't taste it. And when she was in the hospital dying of thallium, somebody put it together that she had thallium poisoning, and then they started researching it and then discovered he was a chemist and he was Mensa, and he was like, when they arrested him for it, he's like, dang it, I didn't think the cops were smart enough to figure that out. I'm like, they should have just shot him on the spot.
So a lot of these poisoners, can you be cured from it?
Some of them, they can do a little bit for you.
Yeah.
Most of it is just making you comfortable till you die.
Wow.
Well,
Yeah.
if they can catch it, there's like a compound called Prussian blue
Yeah.
that is good at uptaking heavy metals and helping your body excrete it. But
It's small amounts. It won't take out a lot.
well, it mimics potassium, which your nerves use to like regulate like muscle contractions. And once it gets into your nerves and does its damage, it's pretty much irreversible.
Wow.
So if you survive thallium poisoning, your life's going to be altered.
Okay.
Bad stuff.
Oh yeah.
It was used in rat poisoning. In fact, there was a rat poison called Thalrat that was sold all over the world because it had thallium, and they mixed it with oats, and the rats ate it and they died. pretty much thallium has been banned in every industrialized country in the world now. They just don't want it out there. It's just too toxic.
It treats a lot of stuff. Malaria, ringworm.
Yeah, I don't want to be spreading it on me for ringworm.
Typhus.
So it is used in certain lenses and photocells. I don't know what it does in those. So. All right, antimony. This is a fun one. So antimony, Graham Young, we talked about him, how he killed his family and stuff. By the age of 14, he'd killed and poisoned kids in school and relatives. He killed his stepmom, all via antimony. That's a picture of him. I saw it right off the internet, so it must be true. All right, so antimony minerals include stibnite, which I'm going to pass this one around for everybody who's wearing gloves. This is stibnite crystals. These are from Japan. Don't lick it. Oh, birth year right. That's the other one. So this one is also, this one I have in a box just simply because it's very, very fragile. It's a sulfide, so it's not going to hurt you to touch it, but it's very, very fragile.
How come they're always, the deadly ones are always so pretty?
I don't know. Same thing about women.
Oh yeah, okay.
Stibiconite is a fun one because stibnite will alter to stibiconite. It oxidizes and becomes stibnite eventually. And in that cabinet over there, there's a nice long crystal of stibiconite that's from Mercury that is altered from stibnite. Bornonite is a copper mineral that often has antimony in it, or well, it certainly has antimony in it. Getchelite is a bright red one. I have getchelite in the periodic table over there. Again, they're so small you need a microscope to see them. They're 1 to 2 millimeters. Jamesonite is a fun one. There's another specimen of that in there. It's made up of little fine hair needles that are very brittle, and so it stays in the cabinet. And then Wakabea scheelite, which is another fun one. That's just fun to say. I'm gonna put that one. It's the yellow.
Somebody?
I don't know where it gets its name. It's the yellow on this one. They're little fibrous hairs. So it's used. They use it to make batteries, lead batteries. They alloy it with that. It's alloyed with germanium and thallium for specialized computer memory storages. I don't know what that does or how it works. It's also a treatment for however you say that.
Leishmaniasis.
Thank you. Which is a parasite, and it's used to kill the parasite. I guess we're giving lead poisoning, antimony poisoning right to the parasite. It's also used in flame retardants, including in kids' clothes, toys, aircrafts, automobile seat covers.
Yeah.
I don't know how much of what we use nowadays, but
At work, we put it as an additive in something that's rated for fire retardants.
oh,
Yeah.
there you go.
Antimony oxide.
All right, bismuth. Bismuth is kind of out of place. If you remember the periodic table at the beginning, bismuth was in there, that whole little corridor of the poisonous ones.
Is it toxic?
No, it's not toxic. It's completely out of place. You would expect it to be extremely toxic, being surrounded by toxic elements, but it's not. In fact, it's the exact opposite. We use it to make medicine. That's why it's the outlier. It's out of place. It's not toxic. In fact, it's the opposite of toxic. We use it in Pepto-Bismol. It's the biz of Bismol. An interesting thing about it is that it has a half-life, incredibly 20 billion years of a half-life. So almost all the heavy metals decay to this. And so eventually, this will be all that's left. So it means after the Earth has gone extinct, all that's going to be floating around here is bismuth. So even thallium, which we talked about, decays to become bismuth. I was going to have Adrian's video here, but I didn't get it. So she grows bismuth and does it with kids. She does a homeschool science class, and she helps kids grow bismuth crystals like these.
And melts like tin, you can make it on a camp stove.
Yeah.
Like the metal.
Yeah, that's what Adrian does. So, In fact, it acts more like a noble metal like gold and silver, platinum, because it isn't toxic. So it does have some fun uses. It's used for fishing anchors because it is not toxic. So we can use that in place of lead. We used to make them all out of lead. It replaces lead in solder. So we have a lot of solder now as bismuth. In Egypt, they would take, it's not a very good picture. This is what we like to collect as mineral collectors, is these little bismolite, is the green balls, but sometimes it comes on bismuth, elemental bismuth, as this brown grayish oxide. And when you grind it up, it would make, the Egyptians used it as a cosmetic for eyeliner. It was white. It's one of the few substances that doesn't shrink when you freeze it, it expands. There's a few others that do it as well.
Tin does it.
Yeah, silicon, gallium, antimony, and germanium. We import 80% of our bismuth needs from China. The U.S. does not produce any bismuth. We have bismuth deposits, we just don't mine them because it's not economically feasible.
It's a byproduct of refining aluminum in a lot of cases.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So bismuth trioxide is what's put in fireworks to make them bright red. It's often called a dragon's egg. It's also, when you do a sparkler, it's bismuth trioxide that does that. So here's some bismuth minerals. Cannonite and juanitaite were both found here in Utah first. It's the type locality for them, and it's I think for both of them, it's still the only location where they're found is here in Utah. Bismite, bismuthinite are both found here in Utah. Native bismuth is not. And mixite is found here in Utah, but they're little sprays of bright blue hair, so I didn't bring any of those out. If you look in this cabinet over here, you'll find probably all of those. This is native bismuth. Again, it's not toxic, so it's no worries there. Oh, I did bring the mixite out. I'm not going to pass it around though. Oh, sorry. Here this is mixite. This is calcium mixite. You can see it's very delicate, fibrous. I'm not going to pass this around. The last time I passed around, somebody touched it in the middle and left a fingerprint. It was a different specimen. I had to throw that one away and kill the person.
So they would come off really easy, it's
Oh, yeah.
fragile?
Yep, yeah. Literally, if you stuck your finger on that, it would just leave a fingerprint right on there. All right, and there's some bismuthinite. These are some large needly crystals down inside here. This is from here in Utah. This one I collected and etched out.
Camera?
Oh, let me show the camera. I'll give it back. All right. I think that's it for bismuth. I just included that one because it was kind of fun. It's the opposite of a poisonous one. All right, lead. Well, I think everybody understands the toxicity of lead. It is 2.5 times more abundant than platinum, 8 times more abundant than mercury, and 17 times more abundant than gold. Some fun facts. The abundance of lead in the solar system has, in the last 4.5 billion years, has increased by about 0.75%. And so we are actually making more lead as time goes on. And that's because many of the heavy elements degenerate into lead and on their way to becoming bismuth. So we are making more element lead. It's used in batteries, radiation shielding, ammo. There are no lead pipes or lead solder anymore. It is gone. They took it out thanks to a guy we're going to talk about, Claire Patterson. We'll talk about him. So lead minerals include argentiferous galena. Galena, everybody knows what galena is, right? No. So here's a galena crystal, or a cluster of galena crystals. This is from the Bingham copper mine. This came out probably in the late 1800s. That is not toxic to hold it like that. Here is elemental lead. This means, or native lead. This is lead from here in Utah that formed as a mineral lead. There's only a few places in the world where you can get native lead.
Camera.
Camera. Man, people are impatient there, wanting to see everything. It's got a few other minerals with it. The red is minium.
Isn't galena often found with silver?
So that's the argentiferous. Argentiferous means it is loaded with silver. So the lead that we mined here in Park City and Eureka and then down in Frisco ran as much as 40 to 60% silver.
Oh my God.
So they didn't care about the lead, they wanted the silver. So they would mine the galena just to get the silver. So, all right.
The reason silver is AG on periodic tables because the Roman name was argentum. Or
Yes.
silver, yeah.
Yep. Mhm.
Yeah.
All right, so anglesite and cerussite, I have those in the cabinets. Feel free to look at those. Again, they're just too fragile to pass around. Native lead, which is the ball in the box from here in Utah, is different than virgin lead and refined lead. So refined lead is when we smelted the lead, and then we remove the sulfur out of it, the PBS, so then we have just lead. Virgin lead means that it was smelted before the first atomic blast went off in the 50s. And that is important because if you need lead for research, you have to have lead that has no cesium in it. All lead that's been smelted or melted since the first atomic bomb will have even the smallest molecule of cesium in it, and it makes it useless for research. So this is a lead brick that is from the USS Alabama, and it's virgin lead.
How many pounds?
Oh, I don't know, like
That is heavy.
25 or something. So.
Oh my gosh.
I didn't think I was that weak. Oh, I want some of that. I want some of that.
That was ordered to be destroyed, and a friend of mine salvaged it for me.
That is
Yeah.
really
We won't
heavy.
mention which corn's right?
It's a long story, but it
Yeah,
had
I
more
was
to do
gonna
with
say, it's
economics
going
than
over my
anything.
head, so I hope you had it.
All right, so we used to have lead in our gasoline,
Oh, yeah.
and you know, my unleaded gasoline. All lead. I don't know why we market it as unleaded gasoline because all gasoline has to be unleaded. It's a law. You just cannot have leaded gasoline anymore.
Actually, aviation gasoline
I was gonna say,
still has.
Okay.
I was just gonna say,
Yeah.
we still have aviation
Right.
gasoline, and some of our race cars still do lead.
Yeah, and they shouldn't. It should be banned. Claire Patterson was a geochemist, and he was trying to date the Earth, and he came up with this process to take a zircon crystal from some old rocks, mostly from the Canadian Shield and from Australia, and he was trying to figure out, because lead decays at a certain rate, and there was no lead found in a zircon crystal, so they had to. They knew if there was any lead in the zircon crystal, it was because uranium had depleted down to lead. And so he could measure the amount of lead in the zircon crystal. The problem he was having is that every time he tried to do it, the tests were way off, and it's because there was so much lead in the atmosphere. So he built the world's first clean room, which had everything coming into it, all the apparatuses, everything had to be boiled in sulfuric acid to remove any lead. People coming in and out had to wear special clothing, just like in a clean room now. The amount of lead that was in hair and dandruff was enough to skew his results. He had to have special filtered air coming in, so it had no lead. And so he built this room, and then he found out the lead contamination was coming from the janitor's supplies. They were coming in mopping the floors with cleaner that had lead in it. And so he became fanatical about it. And he was the one that started putting together the effects of lead on children's brains. And so anyway, he is the one that went to bat against the oil industry for adding lead to it, and he won. I mean, he took them on, and they tried everything to discredit him, but he had all the science behind him, and eventually all the scientists came to his side. So eventually, he was able to use the uranium going to lead in the zircon crystals to date the Earth, and he did it so accurately that when he did it in the 50s, it's still undisputable today. He was so accurate with it, and it's let's see, it's 4.55 billion years old, give or take 70 million years. But it's still an undisputable calculation. Nobody can dispute it even today. So, but he is the reason we do not have leaded gasoline for our cars. Make sure you get that in there.
Well, probably for paint too, right?
Yeah, and the paint. Yeah, he had it removed from paint. He had it removed from the gasoline from cars. So.
The tetraethyl lead in the aviation gas is only for gasoline powered plane engines, not like the kerosene that's used in these
Right.
engines.
Yeah.
So it's a small amount.
So what happens to the brain is that when you have lead, especially in kids, so once the brain's set when you're about 25, then it doesn't have nearly the effect on your body as it does for kids. And it replaces whatever element, what's the element in there that it replaces? I can't remember.
I'm not
Anyway.
sure.
Anyway, it makes it so that kids that have high levels of lead contamination, their brains quit developing. They wind up with similar symptoms to autism, severe autism, reproduction issues, all kinds of horrible effects. And I lived in Twilla in Pine Canyon, and we had a family that lived in the area with us, and they had about a 6-year-old girl that seemed normal. And by the time she was 8 or 9 years old, things were not looking good. And they kept taking her to the doctor. And finally the doctor said, well, we've tested just about everything except lead. So they tested for lead. Her lead levels were off the charts. And so they went out to her house to find out, they sent a whole team out to her house to find out where this lead was. And it was in the soil around their house. And it's because when they built the house in the 1800s, they backfilled all around the foundation with dirt from the backside of Kennecott, the smelter plant back there, Carfork, and it was super high in lead. So the EPA came in and dug out around their house, 12 feet down, took out, it was really high levels in their gardens too, so the lead was in their grapes and in their tomatoes and strawberries. And the further they tested, the further out this plume of lead contaminated soil went. They literally, their house they didn't tear down, but the next 3 houses, they just tore them down and removed 12 feet of dirt, got it all out of there. So you can remediate it out of the ground, but she will always have these brain problems. So there's no fixing it. So. All right, where do we get lead contamination? Lead bullets can lead to lead poisoning, if you read that right. Lead bullets can lead to lead poisoning. So obviously lead poisoning you can get from a number of different things. There are a number of folk remedies around the world, especially in India, that prescribe lead-based things to alleviate whatever ailment. Obviously they don't work. It is linked to some traditional Hispanic medicines where they add lead to foods. India and China and other countries are notorious for doing this. Mexican candy, the tamarind, can absorb lead out of the ground really easily, and so it made into candies.
Fun fact, lead salts, a lot of them are sweet.
Oh,
That's why lead paint chips actually,
tastes good.
yeah, also like in ancient Roman Greece, they used lead acetate as an artificial sweetener.
No wonder they didn't survive.
It's a pretty good theory.
People work in around things at work in the industry, especially automotive and mining, can wind up bringing the dust home, and it winds up contaminating everything. So.
Well, around some of our waterways,
Mm-hmm.
you know, where the duck hunters are, they stopped using lead.
Yeah, they have
lead
to use
shot
Yeah, they have
because
to use those.
it's yeah. because it contaminated the birds
And the water.
and the water.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Fun fact, bismuth's a good alternative for lead. They're almost the same density. It's just bismuth's like 4 times more expensive though.
So what it does to your body is, it's complicated what it does. I can't remember what element it replaces in your body that causes problems. But getting lead poisoning causes severe nausea, coma, convulsions, even death. We already talked about mental retardation. So, Queen Elizabeth I of England was commonly depicted with a whitened face. That's because she used lead face whiteners, lead oxide, which they believe contributed to her death.
It was a Roman Catholic.
But she looked pretty.
But she looked, well, if you think that's pretty.
Well, she did.
All right, so where else can we come across lead? Kohl's actually, up until very recently, used to sell cosmetics that had lead in them. They were imported. Let's see, it was Tiro, an eye cosmetic from Nigeria that Kohl's sold. I think they might still sell it. So it's also used in pottery glazes. It gives great colors and textures. Household dust can contain lead from lead paint chips and soil that may be outside.
Pencils? Pencils?
Pencils are graphite, they're not lead. We call them lead, but they're not. All right, mercury. Everybody loves mercury. It's fun to play with. So mercury minerals include cinnabar, metacinnabar, and native mercury. So let's see what we got here. I'm going to pass around some cinnabar specimens.
It was neat going down to see them on one of your field trips.
Thank you. All right, this is red is cinnabar on galena. This is from the Lark mine. There's some little quartzes in there. Now, when I was a kid and first started collecting minerals, the guy that owned the rock shop that I owned for many years, he was an old dude. His name was, we always called him Old Man Lewis. His name was Dave Lewis. And he always told me, Rick, buy as much of this stuff as you can because it's going to be very valuable one day. And I was like, okay. And it's cinnabar, the red, inside agate. And it came from Mercury. And I bought lots of it. Pieces like this cost me like 25 cents. Well, yeah, it's like, okay. It's valuable today because that's probably worth $5.
Good appreciation.
Yeah, I wished I had bought more. So here's another little piece that's from out there. These are probably the only 2 pieces I have left. I bought probably 10 pounds. And then here's a little bottle of elemental mercury. You can swish it around and play with it. You can see how heavy it is.
You find that like that, Rick? Is that in its natural state?
It does come like that. So you can, in California, there was a mine that mined this massive cinnabar like this. And when you pull it out of the ground, it would often have little blebs of mercury on it. This one used to have those. They've all evaporated. So.
Doesn't that usually grow out of like fumaroles?
Let me think about that. I don't know.
Cinnabar?
I don't know. So out in Mercury, Mercury got its name from Mercury, where they mined it. There's an old USGS report from out there that talks about the mercury, the levels that they had out there, where they had puddles of mercury. And one of the reports talked about how the miners had to wade through waist-deep mercury puddles to get to the working ore bodies. And I've thought about that over the years since I've read that, and I'm like, I'm not sure you could sink down waist deep in a puddle of mercury.
Flow, for sure.
Yeah, you'd float. So I don't know if that's just hype, but it's in a USGS report, so whatever.
It's fun to play with.
It's fun to play with.
When you were a kid.
So,
Table.
so what is this now?
That's just a big chunk of cinnabar, mercury sulfide.
Okay.
So, as a kid, I always carried around a little BB of it in my pocket. It cleaned all my coins. All my pennies were nice and shiny because of it. I don't have any serious problems.
When a thermometer would always break, it's so hard to collect all the little balls of mercury.
Yeah. So when I was in the Army, we had these thermometers that were really technical, really specific. They were about 3 feet long, and they had probably 2 ounces of mercury in them. And we had to measure the temperature inside the helicopter, the gearboxes, while they were running. And one of the guys dropped one of those thermometers, and it landed on the cement floor, broke. And they had the military hazmat team come in, seal off the entire hangar. We all had to go in and get checked for mercury poisoning. They went in and cut out the floor and re-poured cement. And they were like, had these great big fans cleaning the air in there. And I'm like, give me 5 minutes. I'll save you $1 million.
Does it absorb into things then?
What's that?
Does it absorb into things?
No,
Why did they
it's
have
too
to cut out
dense.
the floor?
They were afraid of some lawsuit or something,
Oh.
so it was
Oh.
whatever. I don't know.
Oh,
But yeah, I'm like, as a kid, I carried it around in my pocket. You guys are going crazy. So it was pretty insane.
This is cool.
All right, it still is used in mercury vapor lamps, neon signs. There are specific mirrors, specialty mirrors that they use in the space industry that have a coating of mercury on the back of them. Still used in thermometers, and a lot of really expensive camera lenses that have the stabilization in them. It's because that lens is floating in a puddle of mercury inside there. So.
Would mercury glass have mercury in it?
With mercury glass,
Yeah.
that's why they call it mercury glass.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's just-
But you're talking parts per million. I mean, it's like yeah.
It's used in halogen labs.
Yeah. So big pieces, vases like this, you can still buy. This is carved out of cinnabar, that bright red one that's being passed around somewhere. And I've always wanted to get one. They're just always so expensive.
Another fact about mercury.
is it toxic to touch then?
No. Well, the vapors are more toxic than
Okay.
touching it. Yeah.
Mercury will not wet glass, so it's one of the few liquids that has a downward meniscus because it won't go up the glass. It's not attracted to it. It
Huh.
actually is repellent to silica glass.
There you go. It's also used in exploding ammo. I don't know. Anybody here seen the original Jaws?
Oh,
Yeah.
Where he takes the 45 hollow points
Yeah.
and puts a drop of mercury in there and covers them with wax. That actually really works. When you do that, when it impacts, it explodes.
It also forms amalgams with just about every single metal.
Mhm.
So if you put it on aluminum, it'll cause the aluminum to structurally weaken and
Yep.
crumble apart. So
Yeah.
you're not allowed to have mercury on airplanes.
Yeah.
Because if it were to leak out, it would start eating into the structure of the aircraft.
Which is funny because the first time I heard that, I was like, oh, these guys are just crazy. I mean, mercury, it's just mercury. But yeah, if you think about it, it'll dissolve
Yeah.
or amalgamate the
Yeah.
aluminum.
It's a time lapse. They put drop mercury on a bike frame and
Yeah.
just
Mhm.
leave it for a few days, and then you can just like pick it apart with your hands because
Yeah.
it just crumbles out.
That's cool.
And dentists removed mercury fillings.
From fillings, yeah.
Metal fillings.
Mhm, Yep. So it's also used as a felt preservation. The Mad Hatter in Alice in Wonderland, that's why he was mad, mercury vapor poisoning. So having this and touching cinnabar like this is not toxic, but you heat it up, then you're getting the mercury vapors, and that's what's toxic to the human body.
At what temperature?
Doesn't take much.
So
Your body temperature is enough to make it start to sweat.
Yeah, it's like mercury turning to like a gas is very energetically flavorable. It just needs a little bit of heat and it will just
Gone.
yeah.
Yep. All right. I already passed around the piece of opalite that has the cinnabar in it because it was going to be so valuable. It's going to make me millions. Okay, polonium.
Oh my.
Sounds radioactive.
It is radioactive.
Oh, it
It
is?
is radioactive. It's one of the ones we're going to use to talk about that is radioactive tonight. We'll talk about it again when we do the radioactives.
That's
Marie?
what killed Navalny.
Yes,
It's the favourite poison of the Russians.
yeah, that's exactly right. I don't even need to talk about
It
it.
is more toxic. It's the most toxic metal. Like that's like a rice-sized grain could kill like a dozen people.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, it was first discovered by Marie Curie in 1898. She named it after her homeland of Poland. I tried to find a picture of Alexander Litvinenko, the KGB agent that was killed with a polonium dart, a pellet, and all I could find pictures of was Putin. That's all that would come up when you search his name. The rumor is that Putin ordered him killed by that method. So who knows? It's because it does put off alpha radiation. Once it's in your body, alpha particles are very heavy. They're slow moving, but they do alter your DNA, and destroy your immune system.
They're very large.
I think it's like the most potent alpha emitter though.
Yeah,
It has a very short half-life.
Though rare, it is found in tobacco and in soil and in air. For industrial purposes, it is produced in milligram amounts in nuclear reactors. So you get a great big nuclear reactor and they can produce a few milligrams, which is a very small amount. Only about 100 grams a year, which is about 3 ounces, is believed to be produced worldwide. Who knows how much the Russians are stockpiling? We don't know, but it doesn't last long, so they have to keep producing it. And it is not found in any minerals in nature, but it is found as molecules within other radioactive mineral specimens. But it doesn't form a mineral, it's just a molecule in there. Sometimes it's in biotite too. Okay, Americium. This is a fun one. So there's a fine line between genius and crazy. I don't know who said that, but I mean, it's so true. You know, if you think about any of these other people, if things had not gone right for them, they would have been considered crazy instead of genius, right? So, in the 1990s, a well-meaning 16-year-old Eagle Scout named David Hahn built a nuclear reactor in his backyard in an attempt to solve the global nuclear energy problem. He was obsessed with chemistry and had a habit of performing highly ill-advised experiments, often disastrous results. So he did not build a nuclear reactor like this. He built one in a portable swimming pool.
There was a Boy Scout badge for atomic energy. I think he was going for it.
Right. I got that one and I didn't build a nuclear reactor. So he was not a very good student, but his enthusiasm for nuclear science was just above and beyond. He figured out the phenomena of fission, fusion, and atomic decay on his own. He did that in his own notes. He built what's called a breeder reactor, and he was wearing a dentist's lead apron, and then every night when he was done, he would throw his clothes away, and his parents just thought he was being crazy. And he's like, no, we can't wash them. They're too dangerous. Because they probably were contaminated. And so, he got in a lot of trouble. So he was ordering his nuclear materials, his refined, we're not talking about radioactive minerals, we're talking about uranium and americium. He ordered them from chemists in the Czech Republic who just mailed them to him.
It sounds like
Yeah, we're getting there.
Is that a picture of him?
Yeah, that's a picture of him. This is, so he got in a lot of trouble, but, you know, the Atomic Energy Commission said, okay, don't do it anymore. We can't believe you got this far, but don't do it again. And so he didn't really get in a lot of trouble. So he joined the Navy, and he thought he'd go into the nuclear program in the Navy, and he'd learn even more, and he'd be able to fix all this stuff. And they wouldn't let him anywhere near it. So,
He went to jail, and I think his property was a Superfund site.
it was a Superfund site, yep.
Yeah.
So after he got out of the military, out of the Navy, he returned to his hometown. This was in 2007. He got caught stealing smoke detectors because smoke detectors have americium in them. And I have kind of dismantled a smoke detector here, so you can see this is where it's stored. We're not going to open that up. But it's encased in metals to keep it from being radioactive on the outside of that. On the outside of, sure it's still attached, outside of that. So it's not dangerous at all. Obviously, we all have them in our house.
That's kind of interesting. It says it's a strong alpha emitter.
Uh-huh.
You have an air gap between the radiation source and the semiconductor,
Mm-hmm.
and that's constantly making a positive electric field. And once, like, you know, smoke or dust gets in there,
Mhm.
it breaks the circuit. Smoke alarm goes
And that's
off.
why it works. Yep.
Yep.
So he got caught stealing the smoke detectors from his building. This is the evidence that they used against him. Radiation burned on his face. So again, he got in a little trouble. You say he went to jail. I think he was only in jail for like a few months. So it wasn't anything.
Yeah.
It wasn't like years. So, but yeah. So yeah, so we use them. We use the americium in the alpha particles to create, as Kevin just explained. So again, americium is not found in any as a mineral, but it is found again as just molecules floating around in other radioactive minerals. So, but it's not part of a mineral. So,
What's the red crystal? Rick?
I don't know.
So when we go on your field trip down there to look at the uranium ores,
Uh-huh.
are they poisonous?
Yes.
then? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So when you display them, you have to enclose them?
I have tons. I literally probably have 300 or 400 pounds of radioactive minerals. None of them are in the house. They're all out in the garage.
Okay.
So, yeah, and that's a different. We'll talk about those with
Yeah.
the noble gases and radon. So.
But when
Alright.
you go down there with it, we'd have to be really careful
Uh huh.
then.
Yeah, we'll be wearing gloves.
Yeah.
So take your gloves off by turning them inside out as you peel them off, and we can just throw them away in the kitchen. That was the end of it.
Thank you.
Very nice. Can I check out the basement?
Absolutely.
Down here?
Yep. I can't believe I kept forgetting to show the camera.
Did you look at the
I didn't want to break it.
Actually work quite a bit now.
Yeah,
Sit there.
a chemist that worked at Brush Wellman down in by Topaz Mountain there gave me that. Well, you probably don't have it. Yeah, I couldn't believe I dropped it and it just shattered.
No.
With tweezers and vacuums and mops and.
What's the sphere?
That was for the cadmium. I forgot to pass it around.
Thank you, that was
I
really
wondered
good.
if we could pick them up for us, Rick.
Well,
Rather than trying to sit there. Because you know what will happen.
What's this little one?
that's refined cadmium.
Shiny. Oh, that's
Except for the
that one's
big lead.
Right?
What's this?
That's the birthright.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
So when people had lead fillings, didn't it leach out and into your body?
Well, we had.
Or they're an
I don't-
amalgam?
They were an amalgam, but I don't know that we had lead fillings. We had
Silver.
silver fillings that had mercury because the mercury had been amalgamated.